Let me tell you something most men never hear until it's too late. When a woman is cheating, the first thing that disappears is not her loyalty. It's her energy toward you, not the obvious things, not the dramatic scenes you see in movies. Real life rarely works that way. Most men imagine cheating as some sudden betrayal. One day everything is normal, the next day you discover a shocking secret. But the truth is far quieter. Cheating rarely starts with another man. It starts with emotional distance. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss the signs completely. You see, many men believe relationships collapse because of big moments. A fight, a betrayal, a single mistake. But relationships don't collapse in explosions. They collapse in small shifts, small changes in tone, small changes in attention, small changes in how she looks at you. And most men ignore those shifts because they assume love is permanent once it's established. But attraction doesn't work like that. Attraction is a living thing. It grows, weakens, and sometimes quietly moves somewhere else. Now let's talk about the first behavior that often appears when a woman begins drifting emotionally towards someone else. She becomes strangely protective of her space, not in a healthy independence kind of way. Independence is normal. Every person deserves their own time and privacy. But this is different. Suddenly there are parts of her life that feel closed off. Her phone becomes guarded, her schedule becomes vague. Simple questions suddenly get complicated answers. You might ask something normal like, "Where were you?" And instead of a clear answer, you get a defensive tone. Why are you asking so many questions? Now here's where many men make a critical mistake. They immediately jump into detective mode. They start checking phones, monitoring social media, asking more questions, trying to control the situation. But here's the problem with that approach. When a man becomes suspicious and reactive, he loses his composure. And composure is one of the core pillars of respect in relationships. The moment you appear desperate for reassurance, the dynamic shifts. Now understand this carefully. A woman losing attraction and a woman cheating are not always the same thing. But cheating often begins after attraction fades, and attraction fades when respect erodes. Not just her respect for you, but sometimes your respect for yourself. You've probably seen this happen before. A man slowly becomes overly accommodating in a relationship. He starts abandoning his routines. He stops pursuing his goals. His world becomes centered entirely around the relationship. At first, it looks like devotion, but over time, it becomes neediness. And neediness quietly kills attraction. Because attraction is built on emotional polarity. It's built on mystery, on independence, on the feeling that the person you're with has their own direction in life. When that disappears, something subtle happens. She begins to emotionally detach. Now here's another behavior many men notice but rarely interpret correctly. Her tone changes, not just occasionally, consistently. She becomes more irritated by things she used to laugh about. Small habits suddenly become annoying. Simple conversations turn into arguments. And many men assume the relationship is simply going through a rough patch. But sometimes what's really happening is something deeper. Her mind has already begun reframing the relationship. Psychologically, when someone becomes emotionally involved with another person, their brain often starts rewriting the story of the current relationship. They begin focusing more on your flaws, more on your mistakes, more on everything that feels wrong. This isn't always intentional. It's a psychological process called cognitive justification. In simple terms, the mind tries to justify behavior by creating reasons why the relationship isn't fulfilling anymore. And once that process begins, the emotional distance grows quickly. But here's the most dangerous part. Most men respond to this distance by trying harder. more attention, more texts, more reassurance, more emotional chasing. And that reaction usually makes the situation worse. Because when someone is pulling away emotionally, pressure doesn't pull them back. Pressure pushes them further away. The more you chase clarity, the more the dynamic shifts against you. Instead of appearing grounded and confident, you appear uncertain. Instead of appearing valuable, you appear afraid to lose her. And fear is something people instinctively move away from. Now, I'm not saying every woman who becomes distant is cheating. Life is complicated. People go through stress, work pressure, personal struggles. But when emotional distance is combined with secrecy, irritation, and sudden shifts in behavior, that's when something deeper may be happening. And there's one more behavior that often appears before a man realizes what's really going on. Her investment begins to decline, not just emotionally, practically. She stops putting effort into the relationship. The small, thoughtful things disappear. The enthusiasm fades. It starts to feel like you're the only one holding the connection together. And when a relationship reaches that stage, the real question isn't just whether she's cheating. The deeper question is this: why did the dynamic shift in the first place? Because the men who understand this rarely end up blindsided. They recognize the early signs. They stay emotionally composed. And most importantly, they never build their entire identity around someone else's attention. Because the truth is, the moment a man loses himself trying to keep a relationship alive, he's already losing the very thing that made the relationship strong in the first place. Now here is the part most men never hear. When a woman begins cheating, it is rarely because another man suddenly appeared who was better than you. That is the story many men tell themselves. But the deeper truth is more uncomfortable. Cheating often begins when the emotional dynamic inside the relationship changes. When respect weakens, when attraction slowly fades, when familiarity replaces mystery, and when one partner begins to feel that the relationship no longer excites them the way it once did. Now understand something important. Attraction is not only about looks, money, or status. Those things matter, but they are not the core. The core of attraction is emotional experience. How someone feels around you. Do they feel inspired? Do they feel challenged? Do they feel understood? Do they feel excitement? Or do they feel routine, a predictability, and emotional stagnation? This is where many men unknowingly make a mistake. In the beginning of a relationship, a man is naturally interesting because he is living his life. He has goals. He has hobbies. He has ambition. He has direction. But once the relationship becomes comfortable, some men slowly shift their focus entirely toward the relationship itself. They stop developing themselves. They stop expanding their life. They stop pursuing new challenges. And when that happens, the relationship slowly becomes their entire identity. Now, from the outside, this may look like loyalty or dedication. But psychologically, something important disappears. Individual magnetism. People are drawn to individuals who are alive with purpose. People who are curious about life. People who have direction and energy beyond the relationship. When that energy fades, attraction can fade with it. And when attraction fades, emotional distance often follows. Now here is something very few men understand. Women rarely wake up one morning and decide to cheat. It usually starts with attention, a conversation, someone who listens, someone who notices things, someone who brings a new emotional experience. And because the human brain is wired for novelty, that new attention can feel powerful, especially if the current relationship has become emotionally flat. This does not mean cheating is justified. It simply explains how the process begins. Now here is the critical mistake many men make once they sense something is wrong. They try to force loyalty. They try to control behavior. They try to demand reassurance. But loyalty cannot be forced. Loyalty is a result of respect, attraction, and emotional connection. When those elements are strong, loyalty naturally follows. When those elements weaken, control will never fix the problem. In fact, control usually accelerates the breakdown, because control signals insecurity, and insecurity weakens attraction even further. So what should a man actually do when he begins noticing the signs we talked about earlier? The first thing is something most men find difficult: remain calm. Emotional reactions cloud judgment. Anger leads to arguments, desperation leads to chasing. But composure gives you clarity. When a man remains calm and observant, he sees the situation for what it truly is. The second thing is even more important. Return to yourself. Not in a selfish way, but in a grounded way. Reconnect with your direction, your goals, your discipline, your routines, your purpose outside the relationship. Because the strongest position a man can ever have in a relationship is not control. It is self-respect. Self-respect creates emotional stability, and emotional stability creates natural authority. A man who respects himself does not beg for attention. He does not compete for validation. He does not panic when dynamics shift. Instead, he evaluates the situation with clarity. And sometimes the hardest truth is this: if someone chooses to betray your trust, the real power is not in trying to stop them. The real power is in knowing you can walk away with dignity. Because a relationship should never cost you your identity. It should never cost you your peace. And it should never require you to shrink yourself just to keep someone around. The men who understand this rarely become desperate in relationships. They do not tolerate disrespect, but they also do not become bitter or resentful. They simply recognize that the foundation of every healthy relationship is mutual respect. And if that foundation disappears, the relationship itself cannot survive for long. So the real lesson here is not just about spotting signs of cheating. The deeper lesson is about protecting your self-worth. Because when a man knows who he is, where he is going, and what he stands for, he becomes very difficult to replace. Not because he controls anyone, but because his presence carries stability, strength, and clarity. And those qualities are far rarer than most people realize.